The discovery. The mining drill bit through another layer of asteroid rock when everything changed. Commander Jake Morrison watched the readouts from the bridge of the mining vessel Prospector as his crew worked the outer edge of the Kepler Nebula. This was supposed to be routine work, extracting rare metals from the floating rocks that drifted in the colorful gas clouds. The first sign of trouble came when the drill suddenly stopped. Not a mechanical failure, but as if it had hit something that shouldn't exist. Morrison frowned at his displays. According to every scan they had run, this asteroid was solid rock and ice, nothing more. "Commander, you need to see this," called out Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the sensor station. Her voice carried a strange tone that made Morrison walk over immediately. The sensor screen showed something impossible. Deep inside the asteroid, the drill had uncovered a structure. Not just any structure, but something that pulsed with its own energy. As they watched, the object began to emit a signal that made every piece of equipment on the ship flicker and dance. Morrison had been mining asteroids for 15 years. He had seen strange things before, but nothing like this. The object appeared to be made of materials that their computers couldn't identify. More disturbing, the signal it sent out seemed to adapt and change, as if it was trying to communicate. Within hours, the signal had spread beyond their small mining ship. Every vessel within 50 light-years reported the same thing. Their equipment was picking up an unknown transmission that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The signal didn't interfere with their systems, but it changed them somehow, making them work better, faster, more efficiently. Dr. Elena Vasquez received the emergency call while reviewing first contact protocols at the Galactic Research Station. As the leading expert on alien communications, she had spent her career preparing for the day when humanity would encounter something truly unknown. She just never expected it to happen like this. The journey to the Kepler Nebula took 3 days aboard the fastest research ship available. Elena spent the time studying the initial reports, growing more fascinated and worried with each detail. The signal showed patterns that suggested advanced intelligence, but it was unlike anything in their databases. When Elena arrived at the mining site, she found chaos. Not the bad kind, but the overwhelming kind that came when something incredible happened. Ships from a dozen different species had gathered around the asteroid. The Centauri Collective, the Vega Republic, the silicon-based mechanoids, even the rarely seen crystalline entities had sent representatives. Everyone wanted to understand the signal. Everyone had theories. The Centauri believed it was a weapon. The vegans thought it was a religious artifact. The mechanoids insisted it was advanced technology beyond current understanding. Elena listened to all the arguments, but she focused on the data. The signal showed mathematical patterns that were clearly artificial. More interesting, it seemed to respond to the presence of thinking beings. When more ships arrived, the signal grew stronger and more complex. Working with Morrison's crew, Elena managed to establish a communication link with the object. What they discovered made her blood run cold. The signal wasn't just a message, it was a distress call. Someone, or something, was calling for help across the vast emptiness of space. The breakthrough came when Elena realized the signal was layered. Beneath the basic mathematical patterns lay deeper information. Star charts, coordinates, and what appeared to be a desperate warning. The coordinates pointed to a location beyond the edge of their galaxy, in the empty space between star systems where nothing should exist. As Elena worked to decode more of the message, other discoveries emerged. The object wasn't just sending signals, it was recording everything around it. Every ship, every conversation, every decision made by the gathered species was being analyzed and stored. The Centauri demanded the object be destroyed. The vegans wanted it studied safely from a distance. The mechanoids insisted on taking it apart to understand how it worked. But Elena saw something different in the data patterns. The signal was getting stronger. Whatever had sent this message was still out there, still calling for help. The object wasn't just a beacon. It was a test. Someone was watching to see how different species would react to their call for aid. Elena presented her findings to the gathered representatives. The room fell silent as she explained what the signal really meant. This wasn't just first contact. This was a civilization reaching across impossible distances, hoping someone would care enough to answer their call. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species wanted to ignore the signal and pretend it never existed. Others wanted to study it safely from their home worlds, but a few, led by Elena and the human delegation, argued for something different. They wanted to follow the coordinates. They wanted to find whoever had sent this message and offer help. It was dangerous, possibly fatal, but it was the right thing to do. As the discussions continued, Elena noticed something new in the signal patterns. The message was changing, adapting to their conversations. Somehow, the entity that had sent this beacon was learning about them, understanding how they communicated and what they valued. Late that night, as Elena studied the latest data, she realized the truth. The signal wasn't just calling for help, it was calling for heroes. Someone out there was looking for people brave enough to venture into the unknown, curious enough to seek answers, and caring enough to help strangers. The question now was simple. Would anyone answer the call? The expedition captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the starship Endeavour, watching the final preparations for what many considered a suicide mission. 3 weeks had passed since Dr. Elena Vasquez decoded the alien beacon, and the galaxy was still arguing about what to do. The Galactic Council had voted. 7 species agreed to send a joint expedition to investigate the signal's source. The humans would lead the mission, not because they were the strongest or most advanced, but because they were the only ones willing to take the risk. Marcus had commanded deep space missions before, but nothing like this. The coordinates from the beacon pointed to a region beyond the galactic rim, where space was empty and cold. No stars, no planets, no safe harbor if something went wrong. It would take their combined fleet 6 months to reach the destination, and 6 months to return if they survived. The expedition consisted of 5 ships. The Endeavour carried the human crew of 200, including Elena and her research team. The Centauri sent their newest battleship, the Star Lance, equipped with weapons that could crack a moon. The vegans contributed the Peaceful Dawn, a hospital ship designed to care for wounded from multiple species. The mechanoids provided the Logic Prime, filled with their best analytical equipment. Finally, the crystalline entities offered the Harmony, a ship that could repair almost any damage using their unique abilities. Elena spent the first weeks of the journey working with representatives from each species, trying to decode more of the beacon's message. The signal had grown stronger as they moved toward its source, revealing new layers of information that painted a disturbing picture. The civilization that sent the beacon called themselves the Architects. They had built wonders that spanned entire star systems, created technology that made current galactic science look primitive, but something had destroyed them. The deeper messages spoke of darkness coming from the void, of entire worlds going silent, of a threat that consumed everything in its path. Marcus found Elena in the research lab one evening, surrounded by holographic displays showing the beacon's data streams. She looked tired and worried, her usually bright eyes shadowed with concern. "Any new discoveries?" Marcus asked, settling into a chair beside her workstation. Elena gestured to the swirling patterns of data. The Architects weren't just advanced, they were desperate. These final messages weren't sent to preserve their culture or share their knowledge. They were warning us. The captain studied the alien symbols floating in the air between them. Even without understanding their meaning, he could feel the urgency they contained. Warning us about what? Something they called the void crawlers, entities that exist in the empty space between galaxies, feeding on energy and matter until nothing remains. The Architects fought them for thousands of years before finally losing. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The empty region they were traveling through suddenly seemed less like unexplored territory and more like a hunting ground. Are they still out there? According to the beacon, yes, and they're coming this way. The journey continued through the dark space between stars. As weeks passed, strange things began happening to the expedition fleet. Equipment functioned better than expected, almost as if something was guiding their technology. Crew members reported vivid dreams of vast cities among the stars, of beings of pure light working together to build impossible structures. The Centauri captain, a proud warrior named Orcs, began experiencing visions of ancient battles fought with weapons of incredible power. The vegan medical officer found herself understanding biological processes she had never studied. The mechanoid leader started processing data in ways that exceeded its original programming. Only the humans seemed unaffected by these changes, though they noticed everything happening around them. Elena theorized that whatever force was influencing the other species recognized something different in human minds, something that didn't need to be altered or enhanced. 3 months into the journey, long-range sensors detected something massive ahead. At first, it appeared to be a small moon floating in the emptiness. As they drew closer, the truth became clear. This was no natural object. The structure was enormous, larger than most space stations, built in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. It rotated slowly, generating its own gravity and atmosphere. Ancient beyond measure, yet somehow still functional after millions of years. Marcus called a meeting of all ship captains to discuss their approach. The structure was clearly the source of the beacon signal, but it could also be a trap. The Centauri wanted to approach with weapons ready. The vegans suggested sending unmanned probes first. The mechanoids recommended a full sensor sweep from maximum distance. Elena had a different idea. She believed the structure was testing them, just as the beacon had tested their willingness to help. Whatever intelligence had built this place was still watching, still evaluating. Their approach would determine whether they were seen as friends or threats. Marcus made the decision that would change everything. The Endeavor would approach the structure alone, with all weapons powered down and communication channels open. If the structure was hostile, one ship would be sacrificed to warn the others. If it was friendly, the humans would make first contact. As the Endeavor moved closer to the ancient station, the beacon signal grew stronger still. Elena's instruments detected energy patterns unlike anything in galactic science. The structure wasn't just old. It was alive in some way, aware of their presence and curious about their intentions. When they reached docking distance, something incredible happened. Sections of the structure opened like flower petals, revealing docking bays perfectly sized for their ship. Lights activated along corridors that had been dark for eons. The station was welcoming them home. Marcus gathered his senior staff as they prepared to board the alien structure. Elena carried her translation equipment. The security chief brought weapons, though Marcus hoped they wouldn't be needed. The ship's engineer brought tools to analyze the station's technology. As they stepped through the airlock onto the ancient station, gravity adjusted to match their requirements. The air became breathable, lights brightened to levels comfortable for human eyes. Whatever intelligence controlled this place was making them welcome. Elena's equipment immediately detected powerful signals coming from deeper within the station. Not just data transmissions, but something that felt like consciousness itself. The architects might be gone, but they had left something behind. Something that had been waiting patiently for someone to answer their call. The corridors stretched ahead like pathways into history itself. Strange symbols covered the walls, telling stories of civilizations that rose and fell while Earth was still cooling from its formation. At the center of it all, a massive chamber waited with secrets that would change everything. Marcus led his team forward, knowing that whatever they found here would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. The architects had called for help across impossible distances. Now it was time to learn why. The ancient station. The central chamber of the architect's station took Elena's breath away. The room stretched upward beyond sight, its walls covered in crystalline panels that pulsed with soft light. In the center stood a massive pillar of unknown material that seemed to bend space around itself, creating patterns that made human eyes water to observe directly. Marcus kept his team close as they entered the chamber. The air hummed with energy so ancient it felt like touching the bones of the universe itself. Elena's instruments went wild, detecting power sources that operated on principles beyond current scientific understanding. "Captain," whispered Dr. James Park, the expedition's physicist, "the energy readings here are impossible. This single room contains more power than our entire fleet." Elena approached one of the crystalline panels, her translation equipment working frantically to decode the symbols that flowed across its surface like living text. The patterns were complex beyond anything they had encountered, but slowly, meanings began to emerge. "These are historical records," Elena announced, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "The story of the architects, told in their own words." As her team worked to establish a stable connection with the station's systems, the crystalline panels began to glow brighter. Suddenly, the chamber filled with light and holographic figures appeared around them. Tall, graceful beings of pure energy, moving through scenes of incredible beauty and terrible tragedy. The first hologram showed the architects at their height. Their civilization spanned thousands of star systems, their technology capable of moving planets and creating artificial suns. They had achieved perfect harmony between science and spirit, building wonders that lasted for millions of years. Marcus watched in amazement as the holograms displayed cities that floated between stars, connected by bridges of crystallized light. Gardens grew in the vacuum of space, tended by beings who had transcended the need for physical bodies. It was paradise made real among the cosmos. But then the records changed. The beautiful scenes gave way to darkness and fear. The holograms showed the architect's first encounter with something that came from the empty spaces between galaxies. Creatures of living shadow that consumed everything they touched, leaving behind only void. Elena's translation equipment struggled to process the architect's description of these entities. They called them the void crawlers, beings that existed in the spaces where reality grew thin. They fed on the energy that held galaxies together, growing stronger with each star system they devoured. The war that followed lasted 10,000 years. The architects fought with weapons that could destroy entire star systems, but the void crawlers simply absorbed the energy and grew larger. Traditional warfare was useless against entities that existed partially outside normal space. Dr. Park studied the weapon displays with growing excitement. "Captain, these energy patterns show technology centuries ahead of anything we've developed. If we could understand even a fraction of their science." But Elena saw something different in the records. The architects hadn't lost because their weapons were inadequate. They had lost because they fought alone. Each architect was powerful beyond measure, but they were also isolated. When the void crawlers attacked, each defended their own territory without considering the greater battle. The final holograms showed the last days of the architect's civilization. Their greatest minds gathered in this very chamber, using the station's power to send their final message across the universe. They weren't just calling for help. They were searching for something they had never possessed: the ability to unite different minds in common purpose. Marcus felt a chill as he realized what the records were telling them. The architects had built this beacon not to preserve their knowledge, but to find someone who could succeed where they had failed. Someone who could bring together different species in a united defense against the darkness. Elena's equipment suddenly detected a new presence in the chamber. The central pillar began to pulse with a different rhythm, and a voice spoke directly into their minds. Not words, but concepts and emotions that transcended language barriers. The station's artificial intelligence had awakened. It had been waiting for millions of years for someone to find this place, someone worthy of receiving the architect's final gift. As it scanned the human minds before it, the AI found something that surprised it. Unlike the architects, humans were not perfect beings of pure energy. They were flawed, emotional, often irrational. But they possessed something the architects had never developed: the instinct to work together despite their differences. The AI began to share more detailed information about the void crawlers. These entities existed in a state between dimensions, feeding on the quantum energy that held reality together. They moved slowly between galaxies, taking centuries to cross the empty spaces, but once they arrived, they were nearly unstoppable. Elena studied the tactical data with growing horror. The void crawlers had consumed 17 galaxies, leaving behind only cold, empty space. They moved in a predictable pattern, following the gravitational currents that connected galactic clusters. According to the AI's calculations, they would reach Elena's galaxy within 50 years. Marcus gathered his team to discuss what they had learned. The architect's station contained weapons and defensive technologies beyond imagination, but using them required understanding principles that might take centuries to master. Even if they could learn to operate the ancient systems, 50 years might not be enough time. Dr. Park raised the question that everyone was thinking. "Captain, should we return to the fleet and report our findings? The other species need to know what's coming." Elena shook her head. "The AI is still evaluating us. I think it wants to see how we handle this information before it decides whether to trust us with their technology." As if responding to her words, the chamber filled with new holograms. These showed not the past, but possible futures. Different scenarios of how the galaxy might respond to the coming threat, each ending in either victory or complete annihilation. In the scenarios where the galaxy's species fought separately, the void crawlers won easily. In the scenarios where they worked together, there was hope. But unity required something the galaxy had never achieved: perfect cooperation between radically different forms of life. The AI presented them with a choice. It could download the architect knowledge directly into their minds, giving them instant understanding of the ancient technology. But the process was dangerous. Many who attempted it died, their minds unable to handle concepts that existed beyond normal thought. Marcus looked at his team, seeing the fear and determination in their eyes. They had come here to answer a call for help, not knowing they would become the galaxy's last hope. The decision they made in this chamber would determine whether countless billions lived or died. Elena stepped forward, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to say. "We'll take the risk. Humanity has always been willing to sacrifice for others. If there's a chance we can save the galaxy, we have to try." The AI paused, analyzing their decision with processes that had run for millions of years. Then it spoke again, its voice filled with something that might have been hope. The humans had passed the first test. They were willing to risk everything for strangers they had never met. But there would be more tests. The architect knowledge could not be given freely. It had to be earned through trials that would push the limits of human endurance and imagination. Only those who proved themselves worthy would receive the power to face the coming darkness. The chamber began to change around them, walls shifting into new configurations. The real test was about to begin. The warning. The architect. AI's voice resonated through the chamber as new holographic displays materialized around Elena and her team. These images were different from the historical records they had seen before. These showed the true nature of the enemy that was coming. Elena watched in fascination and horror as the displays revealed the void crawlers in their natural state. They were not creatures in any sense that biological minds could understand. They existed as tiers in reality itself, gaps where the universe had forgotten how to maintain its own structure. They moved through dimensions that had no names, feeding on the fundamental forces that held atoms together. Marcus studied the tactical information with the eye of a military strategist. The void crawlers attacked in waves, sending scout entities ahead to weaken a galaxy's defenses. These scouts appeared as dark matter anomalies that disrupted gravity fields and caused stars to flicker. Most civilizations mistook them for natural phenomena until it was too late. Dr. Park analyzed the energy readings with growing amazement. Captain, these entities don't just consume matter and energy. They consume the mathematical constants that make physics work. In areas where they've fed, the laws of nature become unstable. The AI confirmed Park's observations. The void crawlers left behind regions where cause and effect broke down, where time moved backward, where the speed of light became variable. They were not just destroying the galaxy's civilization, they were unmaking reality itself. Elena's translation equipment picked up new data streams as the AI revealed the full scope of the threat. The void crawlers were not acting randomly. They followed a pattern, consuming galaxies in a specific order that would eventually allow them to devour the entire universe. Every galaxy they destroyed made them stronger and reality weaker. The holographic displays showed the 17 galaxies that had already fallen. Once thriving centers of life and civilization, they were now empty voids where nothing could exist. No matter, no energy, no time, no space. Just absolute nothingness spreading like an infection through the cosmos. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Humanity had always prided itself on facing impossible odds. But this was beyond anything they had ever encountered. They were not just fighting for their own survival, but for the continued existence of reality itself. The AI began to reveal the weapons the architects had developed in their final years. Reality anchors that could stabilize space-time against void crawler attacks. Quantum disruptors that could force the entities back into their home dimensions. Consciousness shields that protected thinking beings from the madness that followed in the crawler's wake. But the AI's tone carried a warning that chilled Elena to the bone. These weapons required perfect coordination between multiple species to function properly. The architects had failed because they could not overcome their pride and work together. Each had tried to be the sole savior of the galaxy, and all had fallen. Separately, Dr. Park studied the weapons specifications with the excitement of a scientist discovering new laws of physics. These designs require materials that don't exist in normal space. We would need to create exotic matter using processes that we barely understand. Elena realized the deeper problem. The architect technology was not just advanced. It was based on entirely different assumptions about how the universe worked. Learning to use it would require them to abandon much of what they thought they knew about science and reality. The AI presented them with detailed records of the architect's final battle. Their greatest warriors had combined their knowledge to create a weapon capable of destroying an entire void crawler swarm, but the effort had required them to sacrifice their own dimensional stability, causing their entire civilization to phase out of normal reality. Marcus understood the implication. The architects had won a single battle by destroying themselves. The void crawlers had simply waited for the effects to fade, then continued their advance. Victory was possible, but only if someone could find a way to use the architect weapons without suffering their fate. The AI's next revelation changed everything they thought they knew about the situation. The void crawlers were not coming to their galaxy randomly. They had been following the beacon signal that Elena had discovered. The architect's distress call had been active for millions of years, inadvertently guiding the entities toward their next target. Elena felt a cold realization wash over her. By answering the architect's call, by gathering representatives from multiple species at the beacon site, they had created exactly the kind of energy signature that attracted void crawler attention. Their rescue mission had become a dinner bell. But the AI did not blame them for this development. In fact, it had been waiting for exactly this situation. The void crawler's approach meant that the galaxy's species would finally be forced to work together or face extinction. The crisis that threatened to destroy them might also be the key to their salvation. The holographic displays changed again, showing possible defense strategies. The galaxy's existing military forces were useless against an enemy that could unmake the physics their weapons depended on. Only the architect technology could provide effective resistance, but it required resources and cooperation on a scale never before achieved. Marcus began to see the true scope of what they were being asked to do. It was not enough to learn how to use the architect weapons. They would need to unite every species in the galaxy, coordinate their efforts across millions of star systems, and maintain that unity while facing an enemy that drove civilizations insane just by existing. Elena studied the communication protocols the AI provided. The architect station could send messages instantly across galactic distances, but only to receivers that had been specially modified to handle the quantum entanglement frequencies. They would need to build a communication network that spanned the entire galaxy. Dr. Park identified another critical problem. The architect weapons required specific types of consciousness to operate effectively, not just intelligence, but particular ways of thinking about reality and existence. Some species might be naturally compatible with the technology, while others might never be able to use it safely. The AI confirmed Park's concerns while adding a disturbing detail. The weapons worked best when operated by beings who understood both individual achievement and collective sacrifice. Too much focus on personal glory led to the weapons becoming unstable. Too much collectivism made them ineffective. Marcus realized why the AI had chosen to reveal itself to humans first. Humanity had always struggled with the balance between individual initiative and group cooperation. They were neither perfectly unified like the mechanoids, nor completely independent like the crystalline entities. They existed in the middle ground where the architect technology functioned best, but being the best suited to use the weapons also made them the most likely to be corrupted by them. The AI showed them records of other species that had attempted to claim architect technology for themselves. The power had driven them mad, turning them into threats almost as dangerous as the void crawlers themselves. Elena understood the final test they were facing. The AI was not just evaluating their ability to use the architect weapons, it was determining whether they could be trusted with power that could reshape reality itself. The wrong choice here would doom not just their own species, but every living thing in the galaxy. The chamber around them began to shift again as the AI prepared to present them with the ultimate choice. They could accept the architect legacy and become the galaxy's defenders, knowing that the responsibility might destroy them, or they could refuse, leaving the galaxy defenseless but keeping their humanity intact. Marcus looked at his team, seeing the same determination in their eyes that had driven humans to explore space in the first place. They had come here to help strangers in need. Now they were being asked to become something more than human to save everyone they had ever known. The choice was about to be made, and there would be no turning back. The test. The chamber transformed around Elena and her team as the architect AI prepared to begin the trials. The crystalline walls flowed like liquid, reshaping themselves into complex geometric patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. The central pillar pulsed with increasing intensity, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. Elena felt the change immediately. Her mind was no longer entirely her own. Information flowed into her consciousness from sources she couldn't identify, showing her mathematical concepts that had no names in any language. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a waterfall of pure knowledge. Marcus steadied himself against a console as similar effects washed over him. The AI wasn't just testing their minds. It was evaluating their spirits, their deepest motivations, their willingness to sacrifice everything for the greater good. Every thought, every emotion, every memory was being analyzed and judged. Dr. Park cried out as visions flooded his awareness. He saw the birth and death of stars compressed into moments, witnessed the fundamental forces of physics bending and breaking under pressures that existed beyond normal reality. His scientific training helped him process the information, but barely. The first test began without warning, the chamber filled with holographic enemies that moved with predatory grace. These were not void crawlers, but something else entirely. The AI explained that these were the Devourers, entities that had served as the crawlers' advanced scouts in previous galaxy invasions. Elena found herself holding a weapon that materialized in her hands. It was clearly architect technology, responding to her thoughts rather than physical controls. The device hummed with contained power that made her teeth ache, but she could feel its potential. This single weapon could destroy a battleship with a focused thought. But the test was not about destruction. As the holographic Devourers attacked, Elena realized that the weapon would only function if she maintained perfect emotional balance. Too much fear made it malfunction. Too much anger caused it to overload. The architect technology required a state of mind that was both passionate and controlled. Marcus found himself facing a different challenge. Multiple holographic scenarios played out around him, each requiring split-second decisions that would affect millions of lives. Save this planet but lose that fleet. Preserve this species, but sacrifice those resources. The AI was testing his ability to make impossible choices without losing his humanity. The scenarios grew more complex as the test continued. Marcus watched civilizations rise and fall based on his decisions, saw the consequences of every choice ripple across generations. The weight of command had never felt heavier than it did in this chamber where thought became reality. Dr. Park's test involved understanding systems that operated on principles beyond current physics. He had to solve equations where the variables changed based on the observer's emotional state, where the laws of thermodynamics bent to accommodate consciousness, where mathematics itself became a living thing. Elena's weapon grew heavier in her hands as the test intensified. The holographic Devourers adapted to her attacks, forcing her to think in ways that combined intuition with logic. Traditional military tactics were useless against enemies that existed partially outside normal spacetime. But slowly, she began to understand the weapon's true nature. It was not just a tool for destruction. It was a device for imposing order on chaos, for forcing reality to follow specific rules even when the universe was trying to forget what those rules were. Using it required complete confidence in one's understanding of right and wrong. Marcus faced his ultimate challenge when the AI presented him with a scenario where saving the galaxy required sacrificing Earth. Billions of humans would die to provide the energy needed to power the Architect Defense Network. The decision had to be made instantly, with no time for debate or consultation. Marcus felt the weight of every human life pressing down on him as he considered the choice. But in that moment, he understood what the test was really measuring. It was not about being willing to sacrifice others. It was about being willing to bear the responsibility for necessary choices, even when those choices would haunt him forever. The captain gave his answer, knowing it would change him forever. He would save the galaxy, even if it cost him his own world. But more importantly, he would take full responsibility for that choice, never blaming others or claiming he had no alternative. Dr. Park's breakthrough came when he stopped trying to solve the equations and started listening to them. The architect mathematics was not just computational, it was communicative. The numbers were trying to tell him something about the nature of reality itself, about the delicate balance that kept the universe from collapsing into chaos. Elena's weapon finally responded fully to her will when she stopped thinking of it as a weapon at all. It was a tool for protection, for preservation, for maintaining the things that mattered against forces that wanted to erase them. Her motivation shifted from defeating enemies to safeguarding what she loved. The test reached its climax when all three challenges merged into a single scenario. Elena, Marcus, and Park found themselves standing together in a holographic recreation of the final architect battle. They had to work as a team, combining their different skills and perspectives to achieve what the architects had failed to accomplish. Elena provided the tactical expertise, using her weapon to hold back waves of attacking entities while protecting her teammates. Marcus coordinated their efforts, making strategic decisions that balanced multiple objectives while maintaining overall mission focus. Park analyzed the enemy weaknesses, finding patterns in the chaos that could be exploited. But the real test came when they realized that victory required one of them to sacrifice themselves to power the final defense. Without hesitation, all three stepped forward simultaneously, each willing to die for the others. The AI registered their choice with something that might have been surprise. The holographic battle ended abruptly as the AI declared the test complete. But instead of losing one team member, they found that their willingness to sacrifice had actually made the sacrifice unnecessary. The architect technology responded to their united intention, drawing power from their bond rather than their lives. Elena felt the weapon dissolve in her hands as the chamber returned to its original configuration. But something had changed. She could still feel the device's presence in her mind, as if it had become part of her consciousness. The knowledge of how to use it remained, but tempered by the understanding of what it truly cost. Marcus found that his awareness had expanded beyond normal human limits. He could sense the connections between all living things in the galaxy, feel the currents of cause and effect that flowed between distant stars. The responsibility was overwhelming, but no longer crushing. Dr. Park discovered that his understanding of physics had fundamentally changed. He could perceive dimensions that had no names, manipulate forces that existed outside normal matter and energy. But with this knowledge came the wisdom to use it carefully. The AI spoke to them one final time, its voice carrying approval and warning in equal measure. They had passed the test, proven themselves worthy of the architect legacy, but accepting that legacy would change them in ways they could not yet imagine. They would become more than human, but they would also become responsible for more than any human had ever been asked to bear. Elena looked at her teammates, seeing the same determination in their eyes that had brought them to this place. They had come here to answer a call for help. Now they were being offered the power to provide that help, whatever the personal cost. The choice was theirs. Accept the architect legacy and become the galaxy's guardians, or refuse and remain human while the universe burned around them. There was no middle ground. No compromise solution. The test was over. The real trial was just beginning. The choice. Elena stood in the transformed chamber, feeling the weight of the architect AI's offer pressing down on her consciousness. Around her, Marcus and Dr. Park struggled with the same overwhelming decision. Accept the power to save the galaxy and lose their humanity, or remain themselves and watch everything burn. The AI had given them time to consider, but that time felt both eternal and insufficient. Elena could sense the changes already beginning in her mind, pathways of thought opening that led to understanding beyond human comprehension. The knowledge was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Marcus activated his communication link to the Endeavor, knowing that his crew deserved to know what was happening. The voices of his officers crackled through the ancient chamber, their words carrying the fears and hopes of everyone who had followed him into the unknown. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the ship's bridge. "We're detecting massive energy fluctuations from your location. The other expedition ships are requesting updates." Marcus looked at Elena and Park, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in their faces. How could he explain that they were being offered godlike power to fight an enemy that could unmake reality itself? How could he ask his crew to trust him with decisions that would affect every living being in the galaxy? Elena approached one of the crystalline panels that displayed the approaching void crawler swarm. The entities were still decades away, but their influence was already spreading ahead of them. Dark matter concentrations were increasing throughout the galaxy's outer regions. Stars were beginning to flicker as fundamental forces became unstable. "We're running out of time," Elena said quietly. "Even if we refuse the AI's offer, the void crawlers will arrive eventually. Without the architect technology, every civilization in the galaxy will fall." Dr. Park studied the technical specifications that continued to flow through his enhanced awareness. The mathematics involved in operating the architect weapons required consciousness expanded beyond normal biological limits. There was no way to use the technology without becoming something more than human. But he also saw something else in the data. The transformation was not necessarily permanent. The AI showed him records of architects who had temporarily expanded their consciousness to use specific weapons, then returned to their normal state afterward. The change could be controlled if one had the discipline to resist the temptation of unlimited power. Marcus made his decision first. "I accept the responsibility," he announced to the chamber. "Humanity has always stepped forward when others needed protection. If this is what it takes to save the galaxy, then this is what we'll do." The AI responded immediately, sending tendrils of pure energy toward Marcus. But instead of overwhelming him, The power waited for his conscious acceptance. The transformation would only proceed if he chose it freely, understanding all the consequences. Elena felt the AI's attention turn toward her. She could sense its vast intelligence evaluating her motivations, searching for any trace of selfishness or desire for personal gain. The architects had failed because some of them had sought power for its own sake. The AI would not make that mistake again. "I choose to serve," Elena said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was accepting. "Not to rule or control, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Dr. Park was the last to decide, and his choice came from a place of scientific curiosity as much as noble intention. "I want to understand," he said. "The universe is vast and strange and wonderful. If expanding my consciousness lets me comprehend more of its mysteries while helping others, then I choose expansion." The AI accepted their decisions with something that felt like relief. For millions of years, it had waited for minds that could handle the architect legacy without being corrupted by it. Now, finally, it had found 3 individuals who might succeed where entire civilizations had failed. The transformation began slowly, waves of new awareness washing over Elena and her teammates. She could suddenly perceive quantum fluctuations at the subatomic level, sense the gravitational currents that flowed between star systems, feel the pulse of life from billions of worlds across the galaxy. Marcus found his tactical awareness expanding beyond anything human commanders had ever experienced. He could visualize battle scenarios across multiple dimensions, coordinate strategies that spanned light years, and comprehend the movement of forces that existed outside normal spacetime. Dr. Park's scientific understanding exploded beyond the boundaries of traditional physics. He could see how consciousness affected quantum mechanics, how emotion influenced the behavior of fundamental particles, how thought itself could reshape the basic structure of reality. But with expanded awareness came expanded responsibility. Elena could feel the fear and confusion of the expedition crews waiting in their ships. They sensed that something momentous was happening but didn't understand what. Through her enhanced consciousness, she could perceive their thoughts and emotions as clearly as if they were her own. The AI provided them with the knowledge they needed to use their new abilities safely. The architect technology responded to intention more than action. A weapon could be activated by pure thought, but only if that thought was perfectly focused and emotionally balanced. Doubt or anger could cause the technology to malfunction catastrophically. Marcus established communication with the other expedition ships using quantum entanglement frequencies that his enhanced mind could now access directly. The alien captains responded with mixtures of awe and terror as they realized what the humans had become. Captain Corex of the Centauri battleship was the first to voice the concerns that all the alien commanders shared. "You have been changed by alien influence. How do we know you are still the allies we agreed to follow?" Elena understood their fear. From their perspective, the humans had been transformed by an unknown intelligence into something beyond normal biological limits. The question of trust was not unreasonable, but it was also irrelevant. The void crawlers would not wait for diplomatic consensus. "We remain who we were," Marcus replied, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through multiple dimensions. "But we are also more. The choice before us is simple: unite behind the architect technology, or face extinction separately." The vegan medical officer, Dr. Yala, raised a concern that cut to the heart of the matter. "The power you now possess could corrupt anyone. What safeguards exist to prevent you from becoming the very threat you claim to oppose?" Dr. Park answered with mathematical precision that somehow conveyed emotional truth. "The technology itself provides the safeguard. It responds to the user's deepest motivations. Those who seek power for selfish reasons find the weapons turn against them. We must remain worthy of this responsibility every moment we possess it." Elena demonstrated the truth of his words by manifesting one of the architect weapons in the space between the ships. The device appeared as a construct of pure energy, beautiful and terrible in its complexity. But as the alien crews watched, she deliberately powered it down and allowed it to dissipate. "We could claim dominion over the galaxy right now," Elena said. "The fact that we choose not to should tell you everything you need to know about our intentions." The debate that followed lasted for hours, with representatives from each species arguing about the wisdom of trusting enhanced humans with weapons that could reshape reality. Some wanted to flee immediately, Others wanted to study the humans from a safe distance, and a few brave souls suggested joining the transformation themselves. Captain Corex finally ended the discussion with a warrior's pragmatism. The enemy approaches whether we trust each other or not. If the humans have become our best hope for survival, then we follow them into battle. If they have become our enemies, then we die fighting them instead of the void crawlers. Either way, we face our fate with honor. The AI observed the proceedings with interest, analyzing how different species process the concept of transformation in the face of existential threat. It noted that the humans' willingness to share power rather than hoard it was already influencing the other races' decision-making processes. Elena felt the weight of their trust settling on her shoulders. The alien crews were choosing to follow humans not because they had to, but because the humans had shown them something worth following. Leadership through service, rather than domination, was a concept the galaxy had rarely seen. But trust alone would not be enough. The AI provided Elena with detailed intelligence about the approaching void crawler swarm. There were hundreds of the entities, each one capable of devouring entire star systems. They moved in formations that existed across multiple dimensions, making traditional military tactics useless. Marcus studied the enemy formation data with his enhanced tactical awareness. The void crawlers were not just random destroyers. They followed specific patterns, attacking galaxies in ways designed to maximize despair and confusion among the defending species. They fed on negative emotions as much as physical matter. "This is not a war in any traditional sense," Marcus announced to the assembled fleet commanders. "The enemy seeks to break our will to resist before they even arrive. Every moment we spend in fear or doubt makes them stronger." Dr. Park identified the key weakness in the void crawler strategy. They relied on the defending species fragmenting under pressure, each group seeking to save only themselves. The entities had never faced a truly united galactic defense, because no galaxy had ever achieved that level of cooperation. Elena realized that their transformation was only the beginning of what needed to happen. The architect technology could provide the weapons to fight the void crawlers, but victory required something more. It required every species in the galaxy to work together with perfect trust and coordination. The AI confirmed her understanding while providing the means to make it possible. Hidden throughout the galaxy were dormant architect communication nodes, quantum entanglement devices that could link every inhabited world in an instantaneous network. Activating them would allow unprecedented coordination between species. But the network came with a price. Every species that joined would need to open their minds partially to each other, sharing thoughts and emotions across racial boundaries. Privacy and secrecy would become impossible. The galaxy would need to become a true community of minds. Marcus felt the magnitude of what they were proposing. They were asking every civilization in the galaxy to surrender its independence, to trust strangers with their deepest secrets, to become part of something larger than themselves. It was the greatest leap of faith in the history of intelligent life. Elena looked at her teammates, seeing the same determination that had brought them to this place. They had accepted transformation to gain the power to protect others. Now they were asking an entire galaxy to do the same. "The choice is no longer just ours," Elena said to the assembled fleet. "Every species, every world, every individual will need to decide whether they're willing to trust each other enough to survive together." The AI provided them with the means to send their message across the galaxy instantly, bypassing normal communication delays. Within hours, every civilized world would know about the approaching threat and the price of survival. Marcus prepared to transmit the most important message in galactic history. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the Human Expedition. We have discovered an ancient threat approaching our galaxy and the means to defend against it. But survival requires unity unlike anything our galaxy has ever achieved. The choice belongs to all of us now." As the message spread across the stars, Elena felt the weight of billions of minds beginning to turn toward their words. The galaxy was about to face its greatest test, and the outcome would determine whether consciousness itself had a future in the universe. The choice had been made by 3 humans in an ancient chamber. Now it was time for the galaxy to choose as well. The Unity. The response to Marcus's galactic broadcast was immediate and chaotic. Within hours, every major government in the galaxy was demanding answers, threatening war, or begging for protection. Elena watched the flood of communications with her enhanced awareness, feeling the fear and confusion of billions of minds struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the threat. The Centauri High Command was the first to respond officially, their warrior culture allowing them to accept the reality of approaching danger more quickly than others. "We pledge our fleets to this alliance," came the message from their supreme commander. "If humanity leads us to victory, we will follow. If they lead us to defeat, we will die with honor." The vegan parliament took longer to decide, their peaceful nature making them reluctant to believe that such violence was necessary. But their deep empathy allowed them to sense the sincerity in Elena's enhanced consciousness when she shared her memories of the architect records. They committed their medical facilities and supply networks to the cause. The mechanoids processed the data with mechanical efficiency, calculating probability matrices that confirmed the threat was real. Their logical nature made them ideal candidates for integration with the architect communication network. Within days, their entire civilization was connected to the growing web of linked minds. Dr. Park worked tirelessly to activate the dormant architect nodes throughout the galaxy. Each activation required precise calibration to match the local species' consciousness patterns. What worked for silicon-based minds differed significantly from what worked for energy beings or hive intelligences. Elena found herself becoming the focal point for the growing network. Her enhanced consciousness could interface with multiple alien thought patterns simultaneously, translating concepts between species that had never been able to communicate effectively before. It was exhausting work that pushed even her expanded capabilities to their limits. Marcus coordinated the military aspects of the Galactic Alliance with strategic brilliance that amazed even veteran commanders. The traditional approach of massing fleets at choke points would be useless against enemies that could phase through normal space. Instead, he developed dispersed defense networks that could respond instantly to threats anywhere in the galaxy. The first test of the Alliance came sooner than expected. Void crawler scouts had been detected at the galaxy's edge, probing the outer systems for weaknesses. These advanced entities were smaller than the main swarm, but still capable of devastating entire worlds if left unchecked. Elena led the first joint strike mission, commanding a mixed fleet of human, Centauri, and mechanoid vessels equipped with early versions of architect weapons. The enemy scouts existed partially outside normal spacetime, making them difficult to target with conventional sensors, but the linked consciousness network allowed the fleet to operate as a single entity rather than separate ships. Elena could sense each vessel's status, instantly coordinate their movements with perfect precision, and share targeting data in real time. It was like conducting an orchestra where every instrument was a starship. The battle itself lasted only minutes, but those minutes proved that the Alliance could work. The architect weapons tore through the scout entities like light through shadow, forcing them back into the dimensional void where they belonged. No allied ships were lost, and the enemy retreated in confusion. The victory sent waves of hope and confidence through the galactic network. Species that had been hesitant to join the Alliance suddenly reconsidered their positions. The sight of ancient enemies working together seamlessly convinced many that unity was not only possible, but preferable to isolation. Dr. Park made a crucial discovery while analyzing the battle data. The Void Crawlers had expected the galaxy species to fight separately, just as the architects had done millions of years ago. The unified response had disrupted their attack algorithms, forcing them to recalculate their approach strategies. Marcus realized that this gave them a window of opportunity. The main Void Crawler swarm would need time to adapt to the unexpected unity. If the galaxy could complete its integration and prepare proper defenses during that time, they might have a real chance of victory. Elena threw herself into expanding the consciousness network, working with alien psychologists and human technicians to bridge the gaps between radically different forms of awareness. The crystalline entities communicated through harmonic resonances. The gas giant dwellers thought in probability clouds. The machine collectives operated on pure logic. Each species that joined the network added new capabilities to the whole. The crystalline entities provided perfect memory storage. The gas giant dwellers contributed predictive modeling that bordered on precognition. The machine collectives offered computational power that could process strategies across multiple dimensions simultaneously. But integration was not without its costs. Several species experienced psychological difficulties as their minds adapted to the shared network. Some individuals lost their sense of personal identity, becoming absorbed into the collective consciousness. Others rejected the connection violently, their minds fracturing under the strain. Elena worked with vegan healers to develop protocols for safe integration, but the process remained dangerous. Every person who joined the network risked losing themselves in the vast ocean of shared consciousness. Only those with strong sense of individual purpose could maintain their identity while contributing to the whole. The breakthrough came when Dr. Park discovered how to modulate the network connections. Instead of full integration, most species could participate through limited links that preserved individual identity while allowing coordination during emergencies. Only the command staff needed full integration, and even they could disconnect temporarily to maintain their sanity. Marcus watched the alliance grow from a desperate hope into a functioning reality. Worlds that had been enemies for centuries were sharing resources and technology. Ancient grudges were set aside in the face of existential threat. The galaxy was becoming something it had never been before, truly united. The Voidcrawler main swarm finally arrived at the galaxy's edge, their presence detectable as a zone of absolute darkness that consumed light itself. Elena felt their approach through the consciousness network like a wave of cold despair washing over billions of minds. The real test was about to begin. The entities moved in formations that defied three-dimensional thinking, attacking along vectors that existed in folded space-time. Traditional military tactics were useless against an enemy that could appear anywhere instantly. Only the consciousness network allowed the alliance to respond effectively. Elena coordinated defensive operations across thousands of star systems simultaneously. Marcus commanded fleets that operated in perfect synchronization despite being separated by light years. Dr. Park provided real-time analysis of enemy weaknesses and strategic opportunities. The battles that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. Weapons of pure consciousness fought against entities of living void. Reality itself became the battlefield as architect technology clashed with forces that sought to unmake existence itself. Victory came not through superior firepower, but through superior unity. The Voidcrawlers had consumed 17 galaxies by exploiting the divisions between defending species, but this galaxy refused to fragment. Every attack was met by coordinated response. Every loss was shared by all and mourned by many. Elena felt the moment when the Voidcrawler swarm finally acknowledged defeat. These entities had never encountered resistance that grew stronger under pressure. Their strategy of divide and conquer had met its perfect counter: unite and protect. The enemy withdrew to the empty spaces between galaxies, their hunger temporarily defeated. But Elena knew they would return eventually, seeking other galaxies that had not learned the lesson of unity. The threat was contained, not eliminated. In the aftermath of victory, the galaxy faced a new question: what to do with the unity they had achieved. The consciousness network had made cooperation possible on an unprecedented scale. Trade flowed freely between species. Scientific discoveries were shared instantly. Cultural exchange flourished as never before. Elena, Marcus, and Dr. Park chose to remain partially enhanced, serving as guardians of the architect technology and bridges between species. Their sacrifice had saved the galaxy, but more importantly, it had shown that different forms of consciousness could work together when they chose to trust each other. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate civilizations competing for resources. It had become a community of minds working toward common goals. Humanity had led the way not through conquest or domination, but through the simple act of being willing to sacrifice for strangers. As Elena stood in the ancient architect chamber, now serving as the central hub for the Galactic Consciousness Network, she reflected on how far they had all come. The beacon that had started everything continued to pulse with its ancient message, but now it carried new meaning. The call for help had been answered. The galaxy had learned to remember what the architects had forgotten: that survival depended not on individual strength, but on collective courage. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibilities that could only be achieved together. The signal that changed everything had accomplished its purpose. The galaxy was finally ready to face whatever challenges the universe might offer, united in consciousness and purpose, stronger together than any species could ever be alone.